Hey everybody, welcome back. This is part 21. In the last lesson, what we did was we used this pimage class, created this image object, and we loaded that image object using the load image method with ant.png file. And then we use this push pop matrix business down here in order to correctly draw the ant and to rotate it. So eventually we just got a single ant rotating about its center. Now, if you don't understand what this is, that's okay. You're not going to have any problems continuing from this point. But later on, when you want to kind of manipulate your own stuff and play with it, you might have some difficulty understanding what it's doing. So go look at the supplementary materials in lesson 20 if you haven't already. Otherwise, I'm just going to do a little introduction here, a brief explanation of what's going on. So remember that the push matrix and pop matrix kind of work as a way to save the current state of the screen. All right, so how does that work? Well, the entire world you're drawing in our case it's this 2D world, has a matrix that is storing the state of the origin and the state of how everything is drawn, essentially. So what I mean by that is it stores this origin as the top left corner, or 0, 0, and everything on the screen is drawn in relation to that 0, 0. So everything you draw is related somehow to this 0, 0. So if I draw 200 or 300 out this way, it's coming with relation to this 0, 0 here, the origin here. But the origin doesn't always have to be there, and the reason we might not want it to be there is because the rotate method, always rotates about the origin. So if I try to draw an ant out here, and remember we saw how I rotated it, it would rotate all the way across the screen because it's rotating around the center, or 0, 0, the origin. So what if I want to rotate it like we're doing here? Well, the way to do that is to save the current state of the screen. So save the screen where the origin is at the top left, put that away, then use a new matrix. You're kind of like, this is this new matrix. I can now play with it however I want. So I translate the origin down into the right, into the center of where I want the ant to be eventually. I then rotate, and what I'm doing is I'm not rotating the ant, I'm actually rotating the whole matrix, the whole way that the screen is positioned. So you have to imagine it as the origin gets moved to here, and then the y-axis is actually getting rotated this whole direction. The y-axis is now facing like this or like this. So I'm rotating the whole grid, this whole imaginary grid that the screen's on. And if you look at the supplementary materials, they have some really good examples of that. So once I've done that, I translate back here to where I want to draw the image, and then I draw it at that point. So the ant is now drawn correctly, rotated correctly, and at the location that I want it to be at. All right, and that's how you do it with the push pop matrix. And so the pop matrix then takes this new matrix that I just created and overlays it on top of the old matrix. So the main matrix you could think of, the one where everything is drawn in relation to, the origin being at the top left. All right, so that's pretty much what's going on here. It's there's a lot of math in the background and other things going on, but we're not going to worry about that. If you would like to dig into more detail, take a look at those materials or go read a linear algebra book. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take some of this code and put it back in. So what of this code can we put back in with no real issues? Well, obviously we can put in the image. So let's go ahead and let's drop in the image here. I'm just going to put pimage, and I got to spell it correctly, and image, and then I'm going to just, let's put it right here. Image is equal to load image and ant.png. And you got to remember that this ant file needs to be in the same file as .pde, ant.pde and sketch2.pde, so you have to copy it from the other project. And we're going to use this file in just a minute to make a nice background. That'll be the very last thing we do in this lesson. Alright, so coming back here, I no longer want to draw these ellipses. I'm going to delete this. And I then want to, what am I going to draw? Well, I could just say image and draw it, but instead I'm going to take all of this very useful code we already created, and I'm going to put it right here. And there we go. So now I'm pushing the matrix, translating, and I'm using the image here I've loaded. And this is actually kind of bad the way I'm doing this, because it's going to load 30 images, because or 20 images or 10 images or however many ants I have. It's going to load that many. And we will fix this later, but right now we don't care about efficiency. We're just worried about it being correct and actually working. All right, so we're going to end up with one problem here, and that's the fact that we have no ROT variable. So for now, I'm just going to take this ROT variable, I'm going to replace it with 0, and I'm going to run the program just like normal. And you're going to find that there's one more problem. Well, there's actually a couple more, but the first one we're going to have to contend with is the fact that our ants are black and the background is black. And that's actually a pretty quick fix. We just pop over here and we throw in 255 instead of 0, and then we run it again, and now we got ants going. And they're not rotating at all, because I told them to rotate 0 degrees. Now I want you to take note, when I say rotate 0 degrees, or rotate 0 radians, the ants are facing upwards. And this is going to become very important when I explain this next part. To get the correct heading for the ant, we're going to use speed. And speed has a really nice method attached to it called heading. And this is another reason I chose vector, was that the vector can automatically give us the direction we're heading in based on the vector. So remember, our vector is always changing, it's rotating around, and the ant is heading in the direction of that vector. So we need to rotate to get the heading of that direction, and that's what this method does. So it pretty much takes care of all the rotation stuff for us just by itself. Now there's one little problem. When I run this, it's going to work, but you're going to notice that the ants are all moving sideways, and they're actually moving. Notice this guy's going up here. His head is to the left and he's moving up. They're all off by about 90 degrees. And if I come back here and put the 0 in, you'll see what I was pointing out earlier. The ants are moving, but they're heading, in this case, if they're rotated 0 degrees, they're facing upwards. If they're facing 0 degrees, rotated 0 degrees, technically I should have them facing to the right. Because when we're talking about radians, and we're talking about angles, angle 0, or 0 degrees, is when the vector is moving along the x-axis to the right. So that's 0 degrees. So our ants are off, if they're facing upwards, they're off by 90 degrees. We need to rotate it a positive 90 degrees this way. We need to rotate it 90 degrees clockwise. To rotate it 90 degrees clockwise, I put this back in, and if 2 times pi, which is radians, is 360 degrees, that means pi divided by 2 is equal to 90 degrees, or 1/4 of 2 pi. And now if I run this, you get all the ants moving in the correct direction. Alright, so it looks pretty good, right? So the ants are moving around. There's still a few little issues. One, the ants are going to be, if you notice down here, let's see if we can get one of these guys coming off, and there he goes. He goes off the screen a bit. We want to fix that. So we're going to come down here, we're going to change the ant is off screen method. I'm going to delete this radius. No longer need that. And I'm going to just change this to be is less than or equal to, I'm just going to say 30. 30. And it's greater than height minus 30. Why am I picking 30? Well, I kind of tested it a little bit earlier and just kind of figured out a good value that would work here to move that graphic so it doesn't ever look like it's going off the screen. And now I can go ahead and run this, and the ants should, yep, see, they no longer go off the screen, and they might, I think it doesn't quite come off all the way to the left, and that's okay. You can play with these values to get whatever you want. If you want to change this back to 0 and this back to 0, then you might get some more. It might go all the way up to the edge of the screen. It should go all the way up to the edge of the screen, and it should bounce off this, and it should bounce off the bottom just fine as well. So notice the ants, they come further over now, and this ant should come down there. Alright, so these guys are still coming a little bit off the screen there, and since I'm a perfectionist in that way, I'm going to change this to 1010. Alright, so play with these if you'd like to get it just to be perfect. I'll just leave it like this. It's not too important at this point in time. Now that we did that, you notice that we did have this variable down here, body size, and we no longer need that. We can actually delete this, and we can delete this. So body size is gone. It's no longer needed. And everything looks pretty good. All the ants are moving. They're not animated. We're not going to do animation in this lesson, this part of the series. We'll do it with the next game. I'll show you how to animate things. And right now we're focused more on learning how to use classes and objects and those type of things. All right, so there goes the ants. All right, so this looks pretty good so far. We've got the ants drawing on the screen and they're moving around. But the last thing we want to do is put in this awesome green background that I have prepared for you. You can find this on the website, or you can just make your own 600 by 600 background. This is really not that well done. But just get this working. To do that, we need to come into Sketch 2, and I make a background here. And then I load it inside here. I say bg is equal to load image, and I call background.png. And now I no longer need this. This actually can go away. I no longer am erasing the background because image will do that for me. It's just gonna overlay every single time this image, and so it will function as a way to erase the background. All right, and that looks pretty good. And so if we run this, we get this. And there I go. Our ants are moving around on the green background. Everything's looking pretty good. There's a tiny little white line right here that I didn't quite edit out, but I think will live. So this brings us to the end of lesson 21. And in the next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to put the guy on the screen and get him running around. And that'll hopefully get you to the point where you understand enough to make a fairly interesting interactive game. All right, so I'll see you in lesson 22, and keep on coding.